Good morning. My name is Sarah Egan. I am the Executive Director of the Center for Children's Advocacy, which is a statewide legal rights organization dedicated to the individual and systemic advocacy on behalf of low-income children. Thank you for being here all night. I listened on and off throughout the day, working, parenting, doing other things, and thinking about what I wanted to share with you about this very important and profound legislative proposal that folks have come from all over Connecticut to testify on. There's a couple things I really want to emphasize. One is I have deep respect for all of the folks who have come out to testify today. That may ring hollow because I am a proponent of the bill, but it's true. I have tremendous compassion for these parents, and I completely agree with the parent that just testified that she said accountability has to be balanced with respect for parental rights. I 100% agree with that. I have been a child advocate for almost my whole career, since before I had kids, but being a parent has changed what that means for me. And then becoming a parent of a child that's very vulnerable, my middle child is profoundly disabled, has changed my understanding of what it means to be vulnerable in the world and the type of safety net that we need for children, for families. So with that empathy of, if I thought that withdrawing my child from school was the best thing for them, believe me, I would want to be in the driver's seat for all of that. And it's imperative that we get that balance right. The second thing I wanted to share is, and with profound respect for the folks here today, there is no case law that supports the notion that states can't regulate the withdrawal of children from school for the purpose of homeschooling. All state and federal case law says that it can. Not that every regulation is appropriate, but that the notion that states can regulate is widely accepted in state and federal courts. The third thing is, and I'm sure you all know this as well as I do, is that most states do, right? In fact, many states regulate homeschool, the withdrawal of children from school to be homeschooled with regulations that are much more stringent that are what in the proposed bill today. Teacher requirements, records, assessments, immunizations, et cetera. In states that maybe would surprise you, maybe wouldn't, surprised me, right? North Dakota, West Virginia, other states like that. Now the difference is they've been doing it for so long. The hard thing is like doing it anew now. The fourth thing I wanted to say, probably the last thing before the buzzer goes off, is that you've definitely heard from me that our child welfare system needs to be a lot better than it is. Our school systems need to be a lot better than they are. I'm dedicated to that systemic improvement. But I feel so passionately we have to do more to ensure that just to finish the thought, under our current system, adults can and do remove children from school under the pretense of educating their children who have no intention of educating and who may not be involved in a compulsory relationship with a state agency where anybody can do anything about that. That has long been a collateral consequence of the way we do things in Connecticut. And I'm convinced that there's a resolution to that. And I wanted to participate in the conversation today about it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative Zuckis.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for coming up here. How do you feel about if there is a child in the public school system that has a substantiated case that goes into their file in school?
It's a good question. I think I heard you talk about that earlier today at some point, because you're right that if that's, I think I heard you talk about earlier today, Representative Zupkis, that if it's not the district that filed the 136, and in the course of the investigation the parent didn't sign a release to talk to the school would not know, right? So it's a good question. I'd like to think, I don't know the answer to that, and from a legal standpoint, I think sometimes it may be appropriate for the school to know, depending on the type of substantiation it was. But I understand, I don't know 100% the answer to that.
Well, you better hurry up and think about it, because
Okay.
this is going to be talked about soon, and
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's coming before the committee. Hope
Yeah.
not, but So I would
Yeah.
like to hear that, because for many reasons.
Yeah.
So if they pull their child out, but why
Yeah.
is little Sarah misbehaving or
Yeah.
not participating or whatever? I think it would help a lot. And
Yeah.
it's kind of the reverse thinking of, people, why are you checking DCF? What
Right.
gives you the right
100%.
to check DCF on me?
Right. Well, and I 100% respect that, and I've had, as you have had, very little sleep, so it's more of a novel legal question, so I just want to think about, what does Sarah think about it, what do I think the law would say about that, but I will think about it and provide an answer to the committee. And I think that other challenge is that, while I said that there are tons of judicial decisions looking at the various ways that states regulate homeschooling, or the withdrawal of children to be homeschooled. That's not something that's been tested much, that relationship between DCF findings and a school system. So there's a lot less to work with there in terms of, shaping the answer to that question. So that's why I'm reaching a little bit, but I will think about it and respond.
Thank you, because this bill does the opposite. It has
Right.
everyone calling for
Right.
DCF, and so they don't communicate now.
Right.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and thank you for your question. Any questions? Yes, Representative.
Thank you. My question has to do with, as we've been sitting here all day, we've really encountered a lot of folks that homeschool that do have special needs children. And with that in mind, can you understand the reservations that they have when the same system that has failed them will now be judging the quality of their teaching?
I 100% understand that concern, right? And that would have to be a couple thoughts about that. That would be my concern, right? That if there's a difference of opinion, it's got to rest with me, right? And I think that should be a primary concern about, getting that from my perspective, getting that legal balance right? And so I look to, what do other states do? There's actually some other states, at least one other state, and I was reminding myself overnight, looking at some, that have particular provisions for kids who have specialized needs. And there's a lot of states that have these record-keeping and assessment requirements as well. So, and I know the committee has done some work, or some folks in the committee have done some work to look at that. It's a very important issue, and so I think understanding those states' experiences is instructive there.
Yeah, and with that in mind, also, I would be interested in knowing exactly, because these are really tailored individually to the children that I'm speaking of, how the school system, would delineate the particular programs that were being taught for these children.
Yes, I haven't seen very much where most states are not dictating curriculum for special needs children. I think I saw it, and I have it in my notes because I knew I wouldn't remember. That's why I brought my computer up. But I did see one state, there we go, computer wasn't turning on, that, if you give me 1 second, I can tell you which one it was. Notes on other states. No, I can't find it quickly. I don't want to keep you waiting.
That's okay.
I did find, but I'll look for it and send it to you, because I did find another state that that has some particular provisions for how the parent can, can have their own plan for educating. I think it was children with developmental disabilities, right? So I'll find that language and send it along to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Rep. Buglione.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here this morning, Sarah. I was wondering if you could potentially answer this, and maybe it's a tonight question, maybe it's a later answer. We've heard a lot of feedback tonight that why bother with this? It's not going to protect anyone. It's not going to catch anyone. And I was wondering if you could speak to the proposal that is in front of all of us and give us your feedback on that.
Yeah. Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? And a very important one to ask and test and think about, and I have given that a lot of thought. What would make the most difference? There's no perfect system. We don't have a perfect system now, in my view, because in my experience, and I have reviewed a lot of terrible things that happen to children over the last many, many years of my career. In Connecticut, parents, guardians, responsible adults can do and have removed their children with no follow-up, and they're not educating at a minimum, right? So that's the now. That's the system now. Is that any of the folks here to know? But that does happen, right? I also don't think it happens as rarely as people think it may think it happens, and not based on what I've seen and reviewed. So when I look at the bill, that's the lens I look at it through. I think about all these different scenarios, all these different cases that I've seen over the years, from the Matthew Tirado fatality investigation that some folks are familiar with here and some are probably not, but I've heard referenced here a few times. That's actually the child I think about a lot, because as some folks have pointed out, I think Attorney Stevenson pointed out in her testimony, which I heard a part of but not all of, Matthew Tirado, who was a teenage boy with developmental disabilities who died a horrific death in his home after a massive failure by the child welfare system, even no question about it, and other systems. He was not homeschooled. He has not been withdrawn, but his sister had been. She had been withdrawn, and not long, maybe within a couple months of his death, she had been withdrawn from school. So I think about these provisions and some of the ones that the folks have talked about today, sort of through that lens. So my answer is, one, I do think that if there's a framework, and this is what I think, right, that if there's a framework that folks have to follow, districts, schools, that will deter some individuals who might otherwise use the lack of a framework as a guise to remove their child from school very easily. Two, if there was a check, notwithstanding the merits of that provision right now, but if there was a check in that case, right, whoever mom went to in Hartford Public Schools to take that little girl out of school, they had to check, that would have seen she had an open case, right? And she would not have been allowed to be removed from school. And that would have forced some other reckoning in the case that may have been protective. So I think it could have made a difference, right? And I think about many other scenarios. I think about Mimi Torres. And yes, that's all still being unfolding in many different investigative forums. But if there was more required than, if there was more that was expected, would things have unfolded the way they did with the school system? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I think there's a possibility that the answer may be no. If there was some requirement that there be a credible demonstration that a child is elsewhere receiving equivalent instruction, would that deter some of the things that we see? I think the answer is yes. Will it deter all of it? I'm sure no. But some of it, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.